Massachusetts to recognize her for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman Raskin. In today's hearing, I am reminded of the words of my mother, may she rest in peace and power, Sandy Pressley. She was a super voter and never missed an election day. And she reminded me every time that I would go with her and she would pull that curtain and then pull that lever, she would turn to me and say, never forget that on this day, on election day, we are powerful. And I would stand up just a little bit taller. I believed her then, and I still do now. Republicans in the Texas state legislature are trying to take away that power. The voter suppression tactics they support are targeted and precise, with the aim of stripping power away from Black folks, Hispanic and Latinx, and voters with disabilities. This is the latest chapter in a long history of systemic, racist, and ableist disenfranchisement. By creating new and broad criminal penalties, Texas Republicans have adopted a strategy of blatant intimidation to suppress the vote. Ms. Perales, yes or no, for the record, do you believe expanding criminal penalties in this bill will deter people from voting?
Yes.
Thank you, certainly agree. Some of the new criminal penalties are directed at family members and volunteers who help voters complete and return their ballots. People with disabilities are more likely to need this type of ethical and well-established accommodation to vote. Rep. Bernal, how do this bill's new requirements for voting by mail or in-person voting impede voters with disabilities from exercising their right to vote?
That's an interesting question. One of the most interesting answers is that it requires a pen ink signature, something that many people with disabilities cannot produce, and they often use a stamp, and so there's no cure for that.
Thank you. And finally, I want to shed light on provisions I found particularly alarming given Texas's history of voter intimidation. If a voter requires assistance from a friend or relative, this bill would allow an uninvited and self-appointed poll watcher, like a member of Republicans' 2020 election integrity brigade, quote unquote, an intimidation group, to watch over them while they cast their ballot. This means voters with disabilities will be subject to greater scrutiny, intimidation, and discriminatory treatment. Ms. Perales, do you agree that this bill enables individuals to harass, intimidate, or obstruct voters under the guise of poll watching?
Yes, it certainly does.
Thank you. Well, I'm convinced more than ever that my colleagues in the Senate must stop forcing people with disabilities and people of color to carry the burden of finding ways to organize against these shameful, suppressive, and anti-democratic state bills. Instead, senators, especially those in my own party, need to remove these obstacles by abolishing the filibuster and passing the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. This is an intersectional fight about disability justice, racial justice, and electoral justice, and we must win because the future of our democracy demands it. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Pressley. We now recognize Mr. Fallon. Is that?
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yes.
I believe it's important that we not continue speaking about things that are not truthful. In fact, the gentlewoman made the assertion that anyone could simply walk in and be a poll watcher. That is not true. The truth of the matter is that you must go through a certification process by your local party to be able to be there. You just cannot
Mr. Sessions,
walk off the street.
Here's the problem. We keep raising as kind of a procedural objection what's really a substantive disagreement.
Yes, sir,
so
but I believe if we're going to give testimony, if we're going to make assertions.
Well, she was using her time, but I'm going to give you, you will have an opportunity to close. Please just take notes on the things that you disagree with profoundly, because we've been keeping a number of members waiting, and I do want to go to Mr. Fallon.
Yes, sir, we did. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Mr. Fallon, you're recognized for your 5 minutes of questioning.